I thought the worst thing that could happen was losing my job. Turns out I was wrong. My name's Brandon Barrett. I'm 52, been a private investigator for over 2 decades, and I make a living digging through other people's dirt. You'd think that would have made me sharp enough to see it happening in my own backyard. But life's funny that way. It waits until you're comfortable, then it cracks you over the skull with a crowbar. Amanda and I had been married for 15 years. Met her when I was working a case down in Houston, caught up in one of those whirlwind romances people like to talk about. She was sharp in her own way, charming, quick on her feet, always knew how to get people talking. I should have known that skill wasn't just for dinner parties. The first real sign came on a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were always the quiet days. No cases on my desk, no calls coming in. Just me and my coffee at the kitchen table, flipping through old case files out of habit. Amanda was getting ready to head out, standing by the door in one of those light summer dresses she always wore. Meeting the girls for brunch, she said, slipping her sandals on. Her voice had that quick, casual tone, like she was hoping I wouldn't ask anything else. I glanced at her, then back at my file. Yeah? Which girls? She hesitated just a beat, but enough for me to notice. You don't know them. That was the first red flag. Not because I kept tabs on all her friends, but because she wasn't the type to keep them a mystery. I nodded, let it go, but the PI in me tucked it away. Then there were the phone calls. Quick, hushed conversations when she thought I wasn't around. She'd walk into the other room, lower her voice just enough to make it obvious. And the laughing, the kind that didn't sound like it belonged to someone talking to the girls. I started watching. Not in a paranoid way, not yet. Just noticing the little things. The perfume she didn't use to wear. The way she'd disappear into the bathroom with her phone and come out looking just a little too pleased. Then, one night, I saw it. Amanda was in the shower. Her phone was on the nightstand, screen lighting up with a message. I wasn't looking for it, but there it was, bold as daylight. A name I didn't recognize. Ryan, can't stop thinking about today. When can I see you again? I didn't touch the phone. Didn't need to. I just sat there, staring at that screen, feeling something shift inside me. It wasn't shock. Hell, I've seen too much in my line of work to be shocked by people anymore. But it was something else. Something colder. She came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, humming some tune under her breath. I didn't say anything. Didn't look up. Just let her walk right past me, phone in hand, fingers moving fast over the screen. That was all the confirmation I needed. Now most men most people would probably explode right then and there. Scream, throw things, demand answers. But I've never been the type to act without thinking. That's how you lose fights before they even start. Instead, I did what I do best. I started digging. Ryan Blake. Park ranger. Big outdoors guy, one of those escape the modern world types. Tall, built like someone who actually enjoys hiking up mountains for fun. I pulled his records, checked his social media. Didn't take long to piece it together. Turns out Amanda had taken a sudden interest in hiking a few months back. Good for the mind, she said when I asked about it. Helps clear my head. Yeah, I bet it did. The next Saturday I followed her. She left early, dressed in those tight leggings she never used to wear, hair tied up like she was starring in some fitness commercial. Drove out past the city toward Lake Grapevine. I kept my distance, followed her car, parked a good 100 yards away when she pulled up at a trailhead. Didn't take long for him to show. Ryan. Mr. Wilderness. He walked up like he owned the damn place, easy smile, hand running through his mess of dark hair. Amanda lit up when she saw him. Not the polite, practiced smile she used around me these days. This was different. This was real. I stayed back, watched from the trees. They talked, laughed, touched little things at first. A hand on her back, fingers brushing her arm. Then the kiss. That's when it hit. Not anger, not sadness. Just a deep, quiet understanding. She was gone. And she didn't even know I knew. I pulled out my phone, snapped a few pictures. Not because I needed proof I didn't. But because I wanted her to see what I saw the moment her world flipped upside down. I left before they did. Drove back into town, parked outside my office. Sat there for a long time, staring at the dashboard, feeling the weight of it settle in. 15 years. Gone just like that. I could have confronted her right then. Could have stormed home, thrown those pictures in her face, demanded answers I already knew. But that wasn't how this was gonna go. Amanda thought she was in control. Thought she was getting away with it, slipping through the cracks while I stayed in the dark. She was wrong. This wasn't gonna be a screaming match or some messy divorce where I came out looking like the fool. No, if Amanda wanted to play games, I was gonna show her just how good I was at them. And when I was done, she'd wish she'd never tried. I sat in my office, the glow of the streetlights filtering through the blinds, staring at the pictures on my phone. I flipped through them slowly, one by one. The way she smiled at him, leaned into him, kissed him like she meant it. I'd seen enough men and women in my line of work do the exact same thing, but it hits different when it's your own wife. I wasn't angry. Anger was a waste of energy. No, this was something else. Cold. Precise. The same feeling I got when I was lining up a shot in the dark, waiting for a suspect to make a move. I reached for my notebook, the old leather one I kept for my own business, not clients. Flipped to a clean page. At the top I wrote, Amanda Barrett. Cheating. Target, Ryan Blake. Then under it, outcome, maximum damage. It wasn't about getting her back. That ship had sailed the second she let that guy put his hands on her. It wasn't even about making her feel bad. People like Amanda always found a way to justify their actions. No, this was about control. About making sure she didn't get to walk away clean. But first, I needed perspective. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Stopped at Dr. Evelyn Grant. She'd been my therapist for a few years now, ever since a case nearly put me 6 feet under. I didn't see her often, but when I did, it was usually because I was at a crossroads. I called. She picked up on the third ring. Brandon, she said, her voice calm as ever. This is a surprise. Yeah. Been a hell of a day. She didn't ask why. Just waited. That's what I liked about her, she let silence do the heavy lifting. Amanda's cheating, I said. Just like that. No sugarcoating. Been seeing some guy. Park ranger. Met up at Lake Grapevine today. A pause. Then I see. You always say that. It's a useful phrase, she said, a small smile in her tone. So, what now? I leaned back in my chair, ran a hand over my jaw. Figuring that out. You don't sound surprised. Because I'm not. She was quiet again. Then, do you want revenge, or do you want justice? I exhaled through my nose. What's the difference? Revenge is about making them hurt. Justice is about making things right. I thought about that for a second, tapping my pen against the notebook. Maybe they're the same thing. You know they're not. I glanced at the pictures again. All I know is she doesn't get to walk away from this clean. Evelyn sighed softly. Then you better be smart about it. I hung up a minute later. Sat there for a long while, staring at my notes. I'd spent years ruining people's secrets. It was time to apply that skill set a little closer to home. First thing I did was set up a burner email and a blog. Nothing fancy. Just a plain, no-frills page with one purpose, to lay out the affair in careful, deliberate detail. I didn't write it like a rant. I wrote it like a case file, dry, factual, impossible to deny. A timeline of where Amanda had been when she met Ryan, what they did. No speculation, no guesswork. Just the cold truth. Then I started placing the breadcrumbs. I made sure the blog link was easy to stumble upon. Send it to a few key people, her boss, some of her nosier friends, a couple of the wives in her social circle who would spread it like wildfire. All anonymous. Just the facts laid out for anyone who wanted to see them. Next, I turned my attention to Ryan. Did some digging, found out he had a reputation at work for being a ladies' man. Nothing serious, but enough for me to know he wasn't exactly the rugged loner he pretended to be. He had a couple of complaints against him for inappropriate conduct, nothing that stuck. But I knew how to make it stick. I sent a package to his supervisors at the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department containing just enough information to raise eyebrows. The kind that makes HR nervous. Pictures of him with Amanda, a few messages that suggested workplace misconduct. No direct accusations, just enough smoke to make them start looking for fire. Then I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. By the end of the week, Amanda was getting phone calls she couldn't explain. Friends were sending her concerned messages, her boss was suddenly too busy for her, and Ryan was dealing with internal inquiries at work. She came home one evening looking rattled. I was sitting at the kitchen table eating takeout when she walked in. Brandon, she said, her voice tight. I didn't look up. Amanda. She stood there for a second, then pulled out a chair across from me. Something's going on. I popped a piece of chicken in my mouth, chewed slowly. Yeah? She hesitated. People are saying things. About me. About us. I set my fork down, finally meeting her eyes. Like what? She swallowed. I don't know. Just weird messages. People acting strange. I leaned back, stretching my arms over my head. Huh. Her jaw tightened. Brandon. Amanda. She inhaled sharply like she was about to say something else, then changed her mind. Instead, she stood up and went to the bedroom. I watched her go, then smiled to myself. That was just the beginning. Amanda wasn't stupid. That was the thing. She was impulsive, sure, and maybe she thought she was slicker than she really was, but she wasn't dumb. She knew something was off. People don't just start acting weird for no reason. And she knew me. Knew how I worked, knew I didn't believe in coincidences. I could see the wheels turning in her head over the next few days. She was more careful with her phone, not leaving it around anymore. Took her laptop to work instead of leaving it on the desk. Came home tense, distracted. She was putting pieces together, but she hadn't figured out who was pulling the strings yet. That was fine. I wanted her to sweat. By Thursday, I got what I was waiting for. A text from an old contact of mine who worked in real estate, someone who had ties to Amanda's office. You hear about your wife? Boss called her in today. Not good. I set my coffee down and typed back. Define not good. Heard someone sent something to corporate. Lotta talk about company values and public image. Bingo. Amanda had built her career on being the polished, charming agent who could sell houses with a smile. The kind of woman other women trusted. The kind people invited into their homes. A scandal like this? That would rot her reputation from the inside out. By the time she got home that night, I was already sitting on the couch, feet up, beer in hand, flipping through a case file just for show. She walked in, tossed her purse on the counter, and let out a long, shaky breath. I didn't look up. You okay? I asked casual. She hesitated. Work was rough. Yeah? I took a sip of my beer. Boss giving you grief? She shot me a quick look, trying to read me. I kept my face neutral. Just some. She exhaled, ran a hand through her hair. Some stupid rumors going around. Huh, I said, flipping a page. People do love to talk. Silence. Then carefully, Brandon, have you heard anything? I shut the file, leaned forward, rested my elbows on my knees. Took my time. Then I met her eyes. Like what? She swallowed. People saying things about me. About us. I tilted my head like I was thinking. Then I shrugged. Maybe they're just picking up on something. You know, things not being right. She went still. That was the moment she realized I knew. Her face changed. The nervous energy? Gone. Now it was all calculation. Brandon, she started, if something's going on, I think we should talk about it. I let out a dry laugh. Now you want to talk? That's rich. Her jaw clenched. I don't know what you think you know, but what, Amanda? I cut her off. But I'm mistaken? But you've got an explanation? You gonna look me in the eye and tell me I'm wrong? She opened her mouth. Shut it. Looked away. Yeah, that's what I thought. I stood up, stretched. You've got a hell of a mess to clean up, Amanda. Better get on that. I walked past her, grabbed my keys off the counter. She turned to watch me, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Where are you going? I grinned at her, all teeth, no warmth. Out. Don't wait up. I left her standing there, fists clenched at her sides. I had somewhere to be. Ryan Blake's place was exactly what I expected, a cabin-style rental out on the edge of town, just close enough to Fort Worth to be convenient, just far enough to play up the whole man of the wild act. His truck was in the driveway. Lights on inside. I parked down the street, took my time walking up. Knocked twice. A pause, then footsteps. The door cracked open. Ryan frowned at me, brow furrowed like he was trying to place me. Yeah? I smiled. We should talk. He studied me, then nodded once, stepping back. Come in. The place was exactly what I expected, maps on the walls, some hunting gear propped up in the corner, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the coffee table. He moved to grab it, pouring himself a glass. You want one? I shook my head. He sat down, studying me over the rim of his glass. So, who the hell are you? I pulled out my wallet, flipped it open to my PI license, just long enough for him to see. Then I put it away. His eyes narrowed. Private investigator. That's supposed to mean something to me. I leaned against the doorframe, crossed my arms. Means I know who you are. And I know what you've been doing. He didn't react right away. Just set his glass down, exhaled through his nose. You Amanda's husband. Good guess. She send you. I let out a short laugh. Not quite. He studied me again, slower this time. Measuring. He wasn't a dumb guy. Maybe reckless, maybe too sure of himself, but not dumb. So what do you want? He asked. I let the silence stretch a little, just enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I said, I want you to understand something. This little adventure of yours? It's done. He smirked. That right? I smiled back. Yeah, that's right. He leaned back in his chair, arms resting on the armrests like he was getting comfortable. And what if I say no? I pushed off the wall, took a slow step forward. Then I make sure your life gets real complicated, real fast. His smirk twitched. You think that little HR meeting today was just bad luck? I continued. Think your boss just happened to start looking into your past right when you started fooling around with another man's wife? He tensed just a little. Yeah, I said, my voice quieter now. I've been busy. And trust me, I'm just getting started. He clenched his jaw, eyes flicking toward the whiskey bottle like he was weighing his options. See, Ryan, I said, keeping my voice even, you're the type of guy who likes to pretend you're above it all. Mr. Outdoors. Mr. No Strings. But the truth is, you care a hell of a lot about what people think. About your reputation. About your job. And right now? That's all hanging by a thread. I let that sink in. Then I smiled again. So I'll say it once. Walk away. Cut her loose. Or I promise you, I'll make sure this little fling of yours costs you everything. Silence. Then finally, Ryan exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Shit, he muttered. I turned, walked to the door, pulled it open. Paused just long enough to glance back at him. Smart move, I said. Then I walked out. One down. One to go. By the time I got home, Amanda was waiting. She was perched on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, foot tapping against the hardwood like she was gearing up for a fight. She changed into one of her usual house outfits, leggings, loose sweater, but the way she sat, stiff and coiled, told me she wasn't planning on getting comfortable anytime soon. I shut the door, tossed my keys on the counter, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. Where were you? She asked. I popped the cap off, took a long sip. Out. Out where? I shrugged. Here there. She let out a sharp breath. Brandon, cut the bullshit. I raised an eyebrow. That's rich coming from you. Her jaw tightened. I know what you're doing. I leaned against the counter, taking another sip. Do you? She stood, crossed the room in a few quick steps. People are talking. My boss pulled me into his office today. Said there were concerns about my personal conduct. Friends are acting weird. My phone won't stop blowing up with texts I don't know how to answer. And somehow magically, Ryan's work is breathing down his neck too. So yeah, I know what you're doing. I nodded slowly, tapping my fingers against the bottle. And? She stared at me, eyes flashing. And I want you to stop. I let out a short laugh. Yeah, see, that's not gonna happen. Her hands curled into fists. Brandon, I swear to God, eh? You swear to God? That's funny. I set the beer down, straightened up. You want to talk about swearing, Amanda? You stood up in front of a church full of people, swore to be faithful, swore to be honest. That didn't seem to mean much to you though, did it? Her face went red. This isn't about that. The hell it isn't. She shook her head, pacing now. Look, you're pissed, I get it, eh? Oh, I'm past pissed, I cut in. Pissed was 3 days ago. Right now, I'm just making sure you get exactly what you deserve. She let out a bitter laugh. What I deserve? Jesus, Brandon, you sound like some bitter ex who got dumped. This isn't some crime to solve. It's over. It happened. People move on. I tilted my head. Yeah? That what you told Ryan when you started sneaking around behind my back? Just a little thing that happened. She folded her arms again, but I could see the cracks forming now. Her confidence wasn't sitting right anymore. She was sweating, trying to find an angle, trying to figure out how to get out of this without losing everything. Fine, she said after a long pause, voice tight. You want to hurt me? Fine. Get your petty revenge. Ruin my reputation, make me look like a villain. But when does it stop, Brandon? What's your endgame? I stared at her for a long moment, then smirked. I'll tell you when I get there. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. You know what? Go to hell. Already been. You sent me there the second you walked into his arms. She stormed past me, grabbed her purse off the counter, and slammed the door behind her. I picked up my beer, took another sip, and let the silence settle in. 2 down. 1 to go. By morning, the blog had spread further than I expected. The gossip train had officially gone off the rails. A few more messages came in, people I barely knew, sending vague, knowing texts. One from a number I didn't recognize just said, damn. That's rough, man. Hope you're good. I wasn't sure if it was sympathy or admiration. Didn't really care. Midway through my second cup of coffee, my phone rang. I checked the screen. Dr. Evelyn Grant. I sighed, debating whether I was in the mood for her calm, measured tone. Decided I probably needed it. Yeah, I answered. Good morning, Brandon. If you say so. A pause. Then I take it things have escalated. You could say that. She hummed. And how do you feel about that? I huffed a laugh. You know, Doc, I don't think you really want to hear the answer to that. Try me. I leaned back in my chair, watching the dust catch in the morning light. Feels right. Another pause. Because it's justice? Or because it's control? I smirked. Maybe they're the same thing. She sighed. Brandon. You said it yourself, document justice is about making things right. Well, guess what? I'm making things right. By humiliating them. By making sure they don't get to walk away like nothing happened. She was quiet for a second. And then what? I frowned. What do you mean? Once they've lost their reputations, their jobs, once they've suffered enough for you to be satisfied, then what? I didn't answer. Because the way I see it, you're making sure Amanda's life falls apart. But what about yours? That one hit different. I ran a hand over my jaw, staring at the coffee in front of me. It had gone cold. You can punish her, Brandon. You can make her regret it. But at the end of the day, she'll move on. Maybe not easily, maybe not quickly, but she will. And you. Evelyn's voice softened. What happens when all you've built is a house of burned bridges? I closed my eyes for a second. Evelyn didn't press. She never did. She just let her words sit there, waiting. Guess I'll find out, I muttered. Or, she said, you could decide when enough is enough. I ended the call. Didn't have an answer for that yet. Amanda didn't come home that night. No call, no text. Not that I expected one. I figured she'd be staying with a friend, maybe trying to spin her version of the story before the whole thing caved in on her. But the thing about people like Amanda? They don't like being backed into a corner. She wasn't just going to sit there and take it. She was going to find a way to fight back. I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Yeah. Silence then, Brandon. It took me a second. Then I exhaled through my nose, leaning back in my chair. Ryan. Another pause. Then, we need to talk. I smirked. Talked last night. Don't think we got much else to say. Look, man, I don't know what your deal is, but this is getting out of hand. Yeah? I swirled my coffee, watching the steam rise. How so? You got people calling my office. My boss is asking questions I don't got answers for. Amanda's a mess. And I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I don't play games, Ryan. I kept my voice flat, even. I win em. A long pause. Then, low and tight, you trying to ruin my life? Ruin? I raised an eyebrow. Now hold on. That's a strong word. I'm just making sure the truth gets a little sunlight. You got a problem with that? His breathing sharpened. You think you're some kind of righteous avenger? That it makes you a better man than me? I laughed. I don't give a damn about being better than you, Ryan. You're not even on the board. Silence. I could hear his teeth grinding over the phone. Then finally he let out a breath. All right, he said, voice forced steady. So what do you want? Now that was the right question. I let it hang there for a second. Let him feel it. Then I said, you walk away. You never talk to her again. You make it clear this was a mistake, and you move on like it never happened. He didn't answer right away. That it? Depends. You planning on being a problem? Another long pause. Then finally, no. Good. I reached for my notepad, flipping to a clean page. Then we're done here. I ended the call before he could say anything else. One loose end tied up. Amanda showed up later that afternoon. She didn't knock. Just walked in like she still lived here, which legally she did, but legally wasn't my concern anymore. She looked rough. Hair tied up, sunglasses perched on her head, the kind of thrown-together look that told me she hadn't slept much. I didn't say anything. Just sipped my coffee, watching as she stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure what to do next. Finally, she crossed her arms. You win. I raised an eyebrow. That right? She let out a bitter laugh. Yeah. Congratulations. You did it. You burned it all down. Happy now? I set my cup down. What exactly did I win, Amanda? She exhaled sharply. Oh, cut the bullshit, Brandon. You wanted to make me pay? You did. Work's a disaster, my friends don't know what to believe, and Ryan, she stopped, shook her head. Doesn't matter. The point is, I get it. I screwed up. You made your point. I leaned back. What point was that? She blinked, thrown off. What? What point did I make? I asked, tilting my head. That you shouldn't have cheated? That you shouldn't have lied? You already knew that, Amanda. You just didn't think you'd get caught. She swallowed, looking away. I didn't mean to get caught, I finished for her. She didn't answer. I nodded, tapping a finger against the table. Yeah, that's what I thought. A heavy silence sat between us. She shifted on her feet, then finally exhaled, running a hand through her hair. So what now, she muttered. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't the same woman I married. Or maybe she was, and I'd just been blind to it for too long. Either way, whatever was left between us was gone. I'll be filing, I said simply. She closed her eyes for a second, then nodded. Yeah. She turned to leave. Then, at the door, she hesitated. I never wanted it to be like this, she said, voice quiet. I took a slow breath. Yeah, I said. Me neither. She walked out, and this time I didn't watch her go. 2 weeks passed. The divorce papers were filed, and Amanda didn't fight it. She moved out, didn't even bother with the usual back and forth over furniture or assets. I think she just wanted to get away from it all, maybe start over somewhere no one knew what she'd done. Ryan? He kept his job but got reassigned to some desk work, the kind of position that clipped his whole, rugged outdoorsman image at the knees. From what I heard, he was laying low, keeping his head down. Smart man. The blog? I took it down after a while. It had served its purpose. People knew. The damage was done and there was no taking it back. But I wasn't interested in dragging it out. Some things just need to be left in the wreckage. For the first time in years, my life got quiet. No wife, no one to answer to, just me and my work. And for a while, that was fine. Then one afternoon I found myself at Ward's Books, this old independent bookstore tucked in the corner of downtown. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just walking, killing time. The woman behind the counter looked up when I walked in. Late 40s, dark hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She had the kind of presence that made people stop and pay attention without her having to say much. She watched me for a second, then smirked. Well, you're either lost or you're one of those guys who pretends he doesn't read. I raised an eyebrow. And which one do I look like? She shut the book she was reading, leaning on the counter. Haven't decided yet. I glanced around. Not a big reader. But I like the smell of books. Old paper, ink. Better than a lot of things. She nodded like that was a respectable enough answer. So, what brings you in? Had some time to kill. She tapped a finger on the counter. That's a dangerous thing. I smirked. Depends who you ask. She studied me like she was piecing something together. You got the look of a man with a past. Don't we all? She nodded. True. But most people don't wear it as well as you do. I glanced at the nameplate on the counter. Allison Ward. I pointed at it. So, Ward's Books. Yours? She nodded. Been running it for 15 years. Keeps me busy, keeps me sane. Some people drink, some people run marathons. I bury myself in books. Seems healthier than most options. She tilted her head. You saying you don't have a vice? I chuckled. Oh, I got plenty. Just depends on the day. She smirked, then turned, grabbed a book off the shelf behind her, and set it down in front of me. Here. You seem like the type who'd appreciate this one. I glanced at the cover. The Count of Monte Cristo. I let out a low laugh. A revenge story. Cute. She shrugged. I didn't say it was a recommendation. Just figured you'd relate. I picked up the book, flipping through the pages. You always psychoanalyze your customers? Only the interesting ones. I looked up at her, and for the first time in weeks, something shifted. A moment. A small one, maybe, but real. I closed the book, tapped it against the counter. I'll take it. She rang me up, and as I pulled out my wallet, she slid a business card across the counter. If you ever decide to be a reader, she said, I do recommendations. I took the card, slipping it into my pocket. Noted. I walked out with the book under my arm, the weight of it familiar, solid. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about the past. A year passed. Life had a way of moving forward whether you were ready for it or not. The divorce finalized, no fireworks, no dramatic last words. Amanda left town a few months after, didn't bother with a goodbye. I heard from a mutual acquaintance she tried settling down in Austin, but word gets around. Turns out people don't forget things like that, and it followed her like a bad shadow. Ryan stayed put but kept his head down. Whatever charm he had took a hit after everything, and from what I gathered, he wasn't exactly drowning in female attention anymore. He stuck to his desk job, swapped out the rugged adventurer act for something quieter. Smart choice. Me? Business was good. Hell, better than good. Divorce cases kept rolling in, seems like every other guy in town had a gut feeling they needed confirmed. And after everything, I had the reputation of the guy who didn't just find the dirt but made sure it was used to maximum effect. People liked that. It wasn't just about catching a cheater, it was about making sure the other guy didn't get taken for a ride. And I was damn good at it. One afternoon, I was in my office going through case notes when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I debated ignoring it, but something told me to pick up. Yeah. A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. Brandon. I closed my eyes. Exhaled. Amanda. Got a minute? Not really. She let out a breath, something tired in it. Look, I'm not calling to fight. Then why are you calling? Another pause. I guess. I just wanted to know if you're okay. I laughed dry and sharp. Oh, I'm great. Business is booming. People love a guy who knows how to handle a messy situation. She was quiet. Then, softer, I never wanted it to end like this. Yeah, I said, flipping through the case file in front of me. You said that before. Do you think we'll ever be okay? I considered that for a second, then shook my head. No, Amanda. I don't. She exhaled, something heavy in it. Guess that's fair. Guess so. Another long pause. Then finally, take care of yourself, Brandon. You too. I hung up before she could say anything else. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The past had a funny way of trying to claw its way back in. But I wasn't in the business of looking back. That night, I stopped by Ward's books. Allison was behind the counter, sorting through a stack of new arrivals. She glanced up, smirked. Back again? Yeah. I leaned against the counter. Starting to think you got a good racket here. Got me reading at least. She chuckled. Careful. Next thing you know, you'll be quoting poetry. Don't push it. She slid a book toward me. Try this one. I glanced at the title. The Art of War. I smirked. Now that's more my speed. Figured as much. I paid, then hesitated, tapping the book against the counter. You eat yet? She raised an eyebrow. Depends. What's on the table? I shrugged. Something edible. Maybe a steak. Maybe something that requires silverware. She studied me for a second, then nodded. All right, Barrett. Let's see what you got. I grinned, tucking the book under my arm. The past was done. No loose ends. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't look so bad.